The German officer waited until Churchill entered the prison hospital, then asked for one last favor before his transfer at dawn, placing a sealed tin box on the table while British guards closed every door. Because the favor was not for himself, the name written beneath the lid belonged to a missing English child, and somewhere beyond the camp a man was already moving to make sure the box never reached London. In January 1945, Colonel Friedrich Albrecht was held with other captured German officers at Hartwell House, a guarded estate in northern England. He had spent 3 weeks in the camp hospital after a chest infection, and Major Thomas Reed arrived that morning with orders transferring him to a larger interrogation center before sunrise. A nurse placed Albrecht's personal effects on a table, including a shaving brush, 2 letters, and a dented tin box sealed with black wax. Reed checked every item against the property list, but the box did not appear on the form and carried no German military marking. Albrecht refused to surrender it to the ordinary evidence clerk and requested that it be delivered directly to Winston Churchill. Reed treated the demand as a delay tactic, yet Albrecht opened the outer wrapping just enough to reveal a British child's school photograph beneath the lid. The photograph showed a girl standing beside a stone church, with the name Margaret Bell written on the back in English. A date from 1940 appeared beneath it, followed by a railway locker number and a London station code that had been closed since the Blitz. Reed searched Albrecht's hospital locker and found a torn page from a German field notebook. The page recorded a Luftwaffe courier flight, a crashed aircraft near Calais, and a sealed civilian packet transferred to Albrecht's unit during the retreat from France. Albrecht explained only that the box had passed through 4 hands and that 3 of those men were dead. He asked for one final favor before transfer: allow him to place the box into Churchill's hands and speak one sentence without another prisoner hearing it. Camp Intelligence Officer Captain Henry Wallace entered before Reed could answer and ordered the box opened immediately. Albrecht swept it from the table, but the wax seal struck the floor and broke, exposing a folded child's dress ribbon, a brass key, and a British identity card stained by seawater. Wallace reached for the card, while Albrecht covered it with his hand and warned that reading the name aloud could endanger someone still alive. Reed removed both men from the table and sealed the scattered objects inside a new evidence bag. A telephone call reached the hospital from London, announcing that Churchill would inspect a nearby aircraft factory that afternoon. Wallace requested authority to question Albrecht before the visit, but Reed sent the photograph and locker code through a secure line and asked headquarters to verify the child first. The answer returned within an hour. Margaret Bell had disappeared during an evacuation train journey in 1940, and her mother had never stopped searching. Churchill changed his route and came to Hartwell House, where Albrecht placed the sealed bag before him and repeated his request for one last favor. Churchill examined the photograph without opening the identity card, then asked why a German colonel had carried an English child's belongings through 5 years of war. Albrecht looked toward Wallace at the door and answered that the man who knew the full reason was already inside the British system. Subscribe for more forgotten German POW stories like this one. Churchill ordered the hospital room cleared except for Reed, Wallace, and a stenographer. Albrecht used the brass key to open a narrow compartment beneath the tin box, revealing a strip of microfilm wrapped around a wooden pencil. British technicians enlarged the film inside the estate darkroom. The first frames showed passenger lists from a 1940 evacuation train, while the final frames contained payments made to a French shipping agent and initials matching British civil servants. Wallace claimed the film was German forgery intended to embarrass the government. Albrecht pointed to a handwritten correction beside Margaret's name and said the mark had been made by a British railway inspector who later appeared in German intelligence reports. Churchill sent Reed to the abandoned London locker with 2 special branch officers. They found a child's suitcase inside, preserved beneath old newspapers, along with a second key and a receipt for luggage transferred to Dover 5 days after Margaret disappeared. Before the officers could remove the suitcase, a station porter pushed a baggage trolley into their path and cut the lights in the storage corridor. Reed followed him through a service passage, but the man escaped onto a departing maintenance train after dropping a British government pass. The pass belonged to Wallace's former clerk, Edwin Marsh, who had disappeared from the civil service in 1941 and was believed dead. Churchill ordered Wallace's office searched, while Albrecht identified Marsh's initials on 3 payment entries from the microfilm. Inside Wallace's locked cabinet, investigators found letters from Marsh written after his supposed death. The letters described a French child arrangement and warned that an old German officer might someday bring back the original evidence. Wallace denied knowing the letters were there and accused a camp clerk of planting them. Before military police could escort him away, the estate alarm sounded from the prisoner wing, where someone had opened a maintenance door and released 20 men into the service courtyard. Guards moved to contain the prisoners, leaving the evidence room with 1 sentry. A hospital orderly wearing a surgical mask entered, struck the sentry with a medicine tray, and removed the tin box, but overlooked the microfilm already locked inside Churchill's dispatch case. Albrecht saw the orderly cross the courtyard and recognized his uneven walk as belonging to Captain Dieter Falk, a German intelligence prisoner housed under another name. He stopped the escaping prisoners by ordering them back in German, then followed Falk into the greenhouse. Falk dropped the box among broken flower pots and escaped through a roof panel before guards reached him. Inside the box, Churchill found the child's ribbon cut in half and a note stating that Margaret Bell had died in France, although no grave or death certificate was listed. The escalation changed the favor into a race. Because Marsh was alive, Falk was moving inside the camp, and the evidence suggested that a missing British child had been hidden by men serving both German intelligence and a British office. Churchill delayed Albrecht's transfer and moved him to a guarded room beside the estate library. He ordered every prisoner identity checked against fingerprints taken at capture, while Reed traced Falk's false name through older interrogation files. The comparison revealed that Falk had entered Britain as Major Otto Reiner, an officer captured in Tunisia. His fingerprints actually belonged to a German intelligence courier reported missing near Calais in 1940, the same week Margaret's evacuation train reached the coast. Reed searched Falk's bunk and found a ferry timetable sewn into the mattress, with a departure circled at Dover that evening. A British Red Cross vehicle was scheduled to carry medical parcels onto the same ferry under sealed humanitarian papers. Churchill ordered the vehicle replaced with an identical van and placed officers inside the cargo area. Albrecht rode beside Reed because he could identify Falk, while Wallace remained under guard at Hartwell House. At Dover, a dock worker directed the van toward a private warehouse instead of the ferry ramp. Reed followed the instruction, and the doors closed behind them as 2 men wearing Red Cross coats approached with forged medical forms. One man was Falk, while the other was Edwin Marsh, older than his government photograph, but carrying the same damaged left hand described in the letters. Marsh demanded the tin box and promised to reveal where Margaret had been taken. Albrecht stepped from the cab holding an empty duplicate box. Marsh opened it, recognized the deception, and signaled workers above the warehouse floor to release suspended cargo nets onto the officers concealed in the van. Reed drove the van forward before the nets dropped, striking a stack of empty crates and creating an opening toward the quay. Falk ran for a fishing boat, while Marsh entered a records office and began feeding documents into a small furnace. Albrecht followed Marsh and pulled a ledger from the flames, but a burning shelf fell across the exit. Reed broke the office window from outside, dragged both men through, and recovered enough pages to show children's names beside shipping payments. Naval police stopped Falk's boat at the harbor entrance and found a false passport for Margaret Bell, issued under the French name Marguerite Leblanc. The photograph showed the same girl several years older, proving that the death note had been designed to end the search. Marsh admitted that Margaret had survived the evacuation but refused to identify her present location. He said she had been moved again when German troops entered France, then threatened that exposing the network could endanger other children placed under new names. The ledger created a major consequence for Churchill because arresting everyone immediately might reveal hidden children to hostile agents, while delaying action allowed Marsh's remaining contacts to destroy records and move them again. Every hour now carried a different risk, and no safe order could solve both dangers at once. The major reversal began when Albrecht examined the rescued ledger and noticed that the German payments started months after Margaret disappeared. Marsh's network had not kidnapped her from the evacuation train. It had taken control after a railway bombing separated her from the official group. A surviving railway nurse was located in Kent and brought to London. She remembered placing Margaret with a man carrying government identification after the child's identification tag was damaged, believing he represented the evacuation authority. The man had been Wallace, then a junior security officer assigned to investigate railway sabotage. Wallace admitted taking Margaret from the station, but claimed he had sent her to a safe French family, when confusion made reunification impossible. Churchill confronted him with letters proving that Marsh later charged wealthy families for replacement identities and transport papers. Wallace answered that he had discovered the scheme only after Margaret crossed the Channel and had stayed silent to protect the children from being returned through occupied territory. Albrecht then revealed the sentence he had wanted to speak privately. Margaret was not the child he had been protecting. During the German retreat, he had found the box with a dying courier and used its records to locate 12 hidden British children near Lille. He had arranged food and false German work permits for the French family sheltering them, while Foch demanded their names for intelligence purposes. Albrecht removed Margaret's file from the group and carried it separately so the entire hiding place could not be exposed if he was captured. The ledger's payment marks were not prices paid for children, but coded expenses for food, medicine, and travel. Marsh had stolen part of the system for profit, while Wallace's silence had allowed the corruption to continue beside a genuine rescue network. Churchill ordered Wallace released from the immediate conspiracy charge, but suspended from duty for concealing the operation. Marsh and Foch remained under arrest, while Albrecht used the ledger codes to identify a convent outside Lille where the children's original records had been hidden. A British liaison team reached the convent and found 11 adults who had lived under French names since childhood. The 12th file belonged to Margaret, who had returned to England in 1943 under another identity and now worked in a hospital outside Manchester. Investigators found her alive, but she refused to meet officials until shown the childhood ribbon from the tin box. She identified the other half still attached to a photograph kept by her foster mother, confirming the records without exposing the remaining families publicly. Churchill brought Margaret to Hartwell House after nightfall and allowed her to enter through the hospital wing without reporters or camp staff. Albrecht did not recognize the adult woman until she placed both ribbon halves together on the table. The reversal transformed his final favor from a request to expose a traitor into a request to return one object without destroying the lives built around it. Churchill now had to decide whether truth required public names or whether justice could be completed without another forced separation. Churchill created a sealed review panel containing one judge, one Red Cross representative, and one tracing officer. Margaret gave testimony under her French wartime name, while the 11 other survivors submitted written statements through protected channels. Marsh attempted to bargain by offering the remaining identity files in exchange for immunity. Churchill refused and ordered police to search a London print shop identified through the ledger's paper supplier. The shop contained blank birth certificates, ration books, and photographs prepared for 2 children scheduled to leave Britain that week. Officers secured both families before Marsh's contacts could move them, ending the final active branch of the false identity trade. Foch then claimed Albrecht had cooperated with German intelligence by creating work permits for the convent. Albrecht produced a captured unit diary showing that he had reported the permits as papers for French factory laborers, keeping the children outside military searches. Wallace testified that Albrecht's false report had prevented German investigators from entering the convent in 1944. His admission exposed his own concealment, but confirmed that the officer's actions had protected the hidden group during the occupation. The panel convicted Marsh and his British accomplices of fraud, abduction, and misuse of government documents. Falk was transferred for separate intelligence proceedings, while Wallace lost his position and faced discipline for hiding evidence from lawful authorities. Churchill ordered the survivors' real identities preserved in a sealed archive rather than published. Each person received the choice to reclaim an original name, keep the name used during the war, or record both without being forced into another life. Margaret chose to keep the surname of the French family that had raised her, but she added Belle to her legal record and sent her mother a private letter through the tracing service. The first meeting took place without newspapers, officials, or photographs. Albrecht's transfer was rescheduled for the next morning. Before he left, Margaret returned the brass key and placed the joined ribbon inside the tin box, then asked him why he had carried it when surrender might have led to execution or theft. He answered that a name hidden for safety still belonged to a person, and someone had to carry proof until that person could decide what to do with it. Churchill listened from the doorway and signed an order entering Albrecht's assistance into the confidential record without altering his prisoner status. At dawn, guards escorted Albrecht toward the transport vehicle, while Margaret carried the tin box in the opposite direction. The evidence archive had already been divided between 3 protected offices, making it impossible for Marsh's network or any single official to erase the children again. The final irreversible act came when Margaret posted her letter and used both names beneath the signature. Albrecht boarded under his own name. Churchill sealed the original ledger, and the favor ended not with a public revelation, but with the missing child choosing how the truth would follow her. Years later, Margaret opened the tin box for her own daughter and showed her the joined ribbon, the brass key, and a certified page bearing Churchill's seal. Albrecht's name appeared only once, beside a sentence stating that he had carried the evidence until its owner could receive it safely. Margaret closed the lid and returned it to the family cabinet, while the protected archive remained sealed in London, preserving the traitors' crimes without turning the children they had moved into public exhibits. Most people know how World War II ended. Very few know what happened inside these prison camps. Subscribe for more Untold WWII stories.